In 1961, in Philadelphia, a woman gave birth in a store. Soon the doctor comes and examines the child, who does not stop crying. To his surprise, the boy broke his legs and arms in the womb. Years later, David takes the train to Philadelphia after a job interview in New York. When he sees a woman sitting next to him, he takes off the ring and hides it in his pocket. They chat about sports and he mentions he's afraid of water, also that he doesn't like football. He also tries flirting with her, but she turns him down and moves to another seat. Then David puts on the ring again. Suddenly the train starts going faster and everything shakes around David. At home, David's son Joseph is watching TV, and the news show a train that just derailed, killing everyone inside. In a panic, David checks the notes and realizes that his father was on that train. Moments later at the hospital, David wakes up and notices someone undergoing surgery nearby before a doctor finds him and asks about his medical history. David explains that he has never had allergies or underlying health conditions and is surprised to learn that he is the only survivor of the accident. In fact, the doctor is amazed by the lack of pain and injuries of David. Not even a scratch. When David leaves the room, he finds his family waiting for him. Joseph tries to get David and his mother Audrey to hold hands, but they soon give up. Later at home, David tells Audrey that he doesn't think he has the job, but he will be moving soon. They are separated and sleep in different rooms. The next day, David attends the memorial service for the 177 people who died in the accident. After the operation is over, David returns to his car and finds an envelope with a card bearing the limited edition logo. When he opens it, he finds no name, only a note asking how many days he has been sick in his life. David then goes to work, which includes being a security guard for one football team. With the card still in mind, he asks the secretary to check how many sick days he has had. Then he watches the team train with nostalgia in his eyes. At the end of the day, his boss tells him that he has never had a sick day since he got the job 5 years ago, because he will get a raise. That night, David asks Audrey if she remembers ever seeing him sick, because she doesn't. Audrey thinks about it and admits that she can't remember a single day that she saw David sick since she met him in college. A flashback takes us to 1974, where the child from before is now a teenager. Turns out that he suffers from osteogenesis, which means that all his bones are very fragile and often end up breaking. The boy is afraid of going out and getting hurt again, not to mention the fact that the other kids at school call him Mr. Glass. To get him out of isolation, his mother tells him that she left a gift outside. The boy gathers his strength and takes the gift, which happens to be a comic book. Her mother explains that she will take another one every day she leaves the house. In the present, the child has become an adult. His name is Elia and there is an art gallery dedicated to comics. He is very protective of comics as an art form and cancels a sale when he learns that the customer wants to give a valuable painting to his 4-year-old son. In the afternoon, David and Joseph come to see Elijah to ask him for information about the map. Elijah explains that he is interested in David's health and is happy to learn that he has never been sick, but that Elijah had an injury. In college, he was in a car accident that injured his leg and forced him to stop playing football. Then Elijah explains that he has studied comic books all his life and believes that superheroes are based on ancient history. Because of his health condition, he always wondered if there was someone else who was the complete opposite, someone invincible. When he learned that Elijah was the only survivor of the train accident, he thought he might be the only survivor. Joseph is excited about the prospect of his father being a superhero, but David thinks it's a weird trick and leaves with his son. That night, David reads about the accident in the newspaper, which prompts him to check his wardrobe. There is a hidden weapon and a folder of newspaper clippings related to his life. The first shows the beginning of his football career and the last is the car accident. The vehicle is really damaged, so the fact that it survived is a miracle. At this point, she is interrupted by Audrey, who asks if he has been with someone else. After David says no, Audrey admits that she was. Confused by the train wreck, she announces that she would like to work on her relationship again, because her survival is a sign of a second chance. Sometime later, Elijah visits David while he is at work, explaining that it is not an accident that he chose security as a career because his instincts tell him to protect people. As they go through the line, David stops to look at one guy in particular and thinks he's going to leave before checking out. As he had predicted, the man quickly came out. Elijah wonders how David knew this guy was carrying a gun. So David explains that he had a picture in his head that showed him. In fact, he has a natural instinct to know when someone has done something wrong. Elijah says it's his superpower, but David doesn't like the way the conversation is going and asks him to leave. Before doing so, Elijah asks if anyone else was in the car accident and David confirms that Audrey was there too. So Elijah goes to his car and sees the man. Alleged armed crossing. He starts to follow her and also asks her to wait, but the man ignores him. Elia tries to walk as fast as he can, given his condition, but it's still too slow. When the man gets off at the subway station, Elijah pushes his body too far and fall, breaking many bones. As his staff breaks and causes excruciating pain, he sees the man's shirt move and reveal the weapon hidden underneath, just as David had predicted. After the game, David comes home and sees Joseph playing soccer. He chides them for it, reminding them that Audrey hates the sport because of the injuries it causes. So David decides to do a little experiment and starts lifting weights. At first he only lifted 250, the most he had ever lifted. Joseph, keep adding more and more with each process until you use all the weights you have. Wanting to learn more, they also added a few cans of paint and David ended up lifting 350 without breaking a sweat. At the hospital, Elijah is told that he has multiple fractures, but the worst is the 14 fractures of the leg, for which he will need physiotherapy. Later, he ends up going to physical therapy with Audrey and uses the opportunity to ask her about her marriage, while pretending that he just wants to get to know her doctor better. He learns that it was David's car accident that led him to quit football that brought them together because he can't stand the sport and the damage it causes. While asking more questions, Elijah accidentally says David's name and becomes Audrey. I suspect Elijah shares his theory, but Audrey doesn't know what he thinks. In another match, David decides to stand in a crowd and every time someone bumps into him, he has a vision. At first it's just the sound of a child screaming, but then he sees a man picking him up. Something in the trash suspicious. David pulls the man out of line to check on him, but finds nothing in his pockets. David decides he was a fool to believe he had the power. At this time, David is called to school because Joseph is injured. The teacher explains that Joseph got into a fight and wonders if David remembers when he was studying there. It tells the story of the boy David, who fell into the pool and sat on the bottom for 5 minutes. When they kicked him out, he was dead until the doctors revived him. Eventually, they changed the rules of behavior around the pool because of him, and the kids shared the story as an urban legend. Hearing this, David becomes even more convinced that he is not a superhero. After leaving school, Joseph explains that he got into a fight because he stood up for a girl who was bullied because of his race, saying that he wants to be a hero like his father. David tries to say that it's normal, but Joseph doesn't believe him. In the evening, Audrey tells David that Elijah told everything. Before they can argue, they find out that Joseph took David's gun and pointed it at him, wanting to show that he could not be hurt. The boy hesitates for a few seconds and David manages to convince him to ask. The next day, David visits Elia, who immediately confirms that the man in the stadium had a gun. Elijah also thinks that David was not hurt in the car accident. He made up a lie to quit football so Audrey could date him. David doesn't want Elia to bother him or his family anymore and tells him how he had pneumonia as a child from the time he almost drowned, which should be enough proof to drop the subject. Later, Elijah is at the comic book store in an unresponsive state. The clerk has to close the store, so he starts to drag Elijah in his wheelchair, but Elijah keeps moving the wheel to get out. After several attempts, Elijah finally speaks when he does find the comic you want. Meanwhile, David and Audrey leave Joseph with a babysitter so they can go out with him. They have a drink together and try to reconnect, forcing David to admit that he has been keeping the family at bay because something is wrong. When they return, the babysitter tells them that she got a call from New York saying that David got the job. But the family assures them that they are not going anywhere. There is also a message on Elijah's phone, explaining that every hero has one weakness and that David's kryptonite is water. Desperate for no answers, David sneaks out in the middle of the night to find the train wrecked. He looks at the wrecked car and knows that no normal person could survive. This causes a flashback to the car accident and it is revealed that he escaped unharmed, but Audrey was trapped in the burning vehicle. David used his super strength to open the car door and save Audrey. Soon someone came to help and David realized it was strange. So you don't get hurt. Haunted by this memory, David calls Elijah and admits that he has never been hurt in his life, asking what he should do. Elijah tells him to go where the people are. Moments later, David enters a crowded area and spreads his wings as he intently begins investigating people's crimes. He saw a woman distracting an employee to steal jewelry, a man throwing a bottle at a group of blacks while insulting them because of their race, and a man taking advantage of an unconscious drunk girl. When he meets the doorman, he discovers that the man killed a man to take control of his house. David is waiting for the door. She finished work and followed him home, watching him enter the back door. Following the same route, David also enters and finds the place a mess. Not to mention the owner's body is still on the stairs. He then looks around the room and finds 2 children tied up in a closet. David immediately releases them and asks them to be quiet. David then checks the master bedroom and finds the mother tied up as well. The balcony door is open and David walks through it, thinking the boy might have escaped. At the end, the guard appears behind David and pushes him off the balcony, causing him to fall on a wet surface. David looks around and realizes that he is on a pool cover, which slowly begins to sink under his weight. Entangled in the fabric, David is unable to swim and continues to struggle to breathe and survive. Fortunately, A stick suddenly appears in the water and he grabs it so he can pull it out. Turns out that the children have come to the rescue. David then returns to the main room and he grabs the doorman from behind to choke him. The man fights back and pushes David against the wall, causing damage to the surface. David is getting stronger and manages to kill the boy in the end. So he frees the mother, but unfortunately she is already dead. At night, David takes Audrey out of her room so she can sleep in the same bed again. The feeling that something is wrong is finally gone. The next morning, Joseph sees his parents behaving very affectionately to each other. While Audrey is distracted, David shows Joseph the newspaper with the news about the dead guard, which includes an illustration of a mysterious vigilante. David confirms that it is him and asks Joseph to keep it a secret. Sometime later, David goes to Elijah's art exhibition and meets his mother, who tells him about the two types of villains: those who fight fists and those who fight with their minds. The woman heard about David because Elijah calls him a friend. David then follows Elijah into his office and Elijah congratulates him on his first night as a vigilante. He offers to shake her hand, and when they do, David does one. Shocking revelation. For years, Elijah has intentionally caused accidents to find a superhero, including the train David was on. Shocked, David looks around and notices Elijah's plans and quests. Elijah explains that now that David knows who he is, he finally knows his identity. The villain to David's hero. As in the stories, they are exact opposites, but sometimes even friends. Maybe Mr. Glass was still Elijah's villain code name. David calls immediately the police and Elia is sent to an institution for insane criminals.